All right, everybody. So today's guest isn't just off the grid. She's rewriting the rules. Michelle Knox just started her journey with a drink and a question. What if solar could pay for itself? 16 years later, she's not only made it happen, she's built a company, taken on utilities in court, and authored a legislative bill to defend clean energy rights. This is not your average founder story. This is solar with a shot of drops and a whole lot of grit. So, welcome back to Off the Grid on the Record, the podcast where we sit down with people rethinking the way we power our world, one rooftop, one policy, one story at a time. I'm your host, Yarek, and today we're talking with Michelle Knox, founder of Wind Solar USA, an Illinois-based company doing way more than just installs. We're talking customer education, courtroom showdowns, and legislative advocacy. So let's get into it. Hello, Michelle. How are you doing today?
I'm well, thank you, Yark. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. No, we're super, super excited. I think we have a lot to kind of jump into. So, I mean, let's first off, take it back. You're a teacher. It's 2007 and over drinks and, a friend floats you over an idea about solar loans and utility payback. Most people would kind of nod and move on, but you started researching. What hooked you?
Yeah, so I've always been one that was kind of deemed weird, if you will. And so I've always liked alternative things. That's like, as you mentioned, I was a teacher. I was a Montessori teacher. Had never even heard of Montessori before I started that endeavor. Then, so when my friend said, "Hey, I wonder if someone could take out a loan for solar, could use the utility savings to pay for the solar system over time, and then eventually have it paid for and have cream at the end in the form of clean energy from the sun." And it was so intriguing to me that it just wouldn't leave. And so I had to start researching. And because I was a teacher, I had summers off. So it gave me a good opportunity to be able to investigate. And at that time, I thought the paybacks were about 20 years, but systems were warranted for 25. So I'm like, well, what can you buy that pays for itself and then pays you to keep it? Well, obviously, solar energy. And so that was in 2007. And so I began researching, and here I am today.
That's fantastic. And that's what's the cool part of the story too, is you didn't just, dive into solar. You trained for years. You looked at wind, solar thermal, and, photovoltaics. Like, kind of why go so deep before even launching?
Well, it's probably that teacher part in me, that in starting the business, I wanted to make sure that I was educated so that I could be a good educator to others. At that time, especially where I live here in the Midwest, in central Illinois, I live in a village of 239. Most people didn't even know about solar. And when I'd say I was starting a solar business, they'd say, "SLAR, what's that?" And because I didn't know at that time which technology was going to emerge, I decided it best that I just train on all three. So I spent about 3.5 years taking my training through the Midwest Renewable Energy Association in Custer, Wisconsin. And it's also funny because back then there were only two training facilities for renewable energy in the entire country, one in Wisconsin, one in Colorado. Wisconsin was closer logistically, and
Hmm.
let's remember that we weren't yet doing online trainings at that point. So I had to trek back and forth while still working another job, use my vacation days and so on to be able to gain the education. And I really thought that I'd probably be doing more wind, because at that time wind was kind of sexy and everybody like wanted a wind turbine. And but I had trained on solar photovoltaics because I thought, well, I think that it could also be, something that could take off. And luckily I did, because the price for solar photovoltaics dropped from about $6.50 a watt back then to $3.15 today. And then we couple that with incentives that we have available here in the state of Illinois and also on the federal level at present. And the paybacks are just much better. So I'm glad that I did all three. I have the background on all three, but I primarily focus on solar photovoltaics today.
That's amazing. That's actually one of the things I love about, the company. It's not just a transactional company. And I think stemming back to your teacher past, you've built an education first process, where your pitch decks are, like you mentioned to me earlier, they're 27 page, lesson plans. Why was that the right path?
Well, because I feel like if I do a good job with education, it sells itself. So I still consider myself a teacher. Even though I'm running a renewable energy business and I'm selling solar, I still consider myself a teacher. And I feel like if I do a good job at of teaching, then it makes sense. The reason for the 27 pages is I wanted to include not only the financial aspects of the project, but information about the company so that people knew a little bit about us and it could gain trust. And I also wanted to include all the specification sheets and warranty information on the products we were recommending. As well as some cheat sheet notes that I've took for folks on our renewable energy credit program here in Illinois because it's kind of technical, and I
Mm.
wanted people to have like a leave behind that they could refer back to. So we spent probably 3.5 months developing our current cost model to make sure that we had the flow correct. And the funny thing is, today, like when I'm doing presentations and I get done with one page, the customer many times will say, well, but this doesn't have my utility savings in there. I don't know what that is yet. And I'm saying, oh, well, that was a perfect segue to our next page, which is your utility savings. And so the flow has proven itself in that it's the way that the customer's mind works. So I'm kind of taking it through in a logical way for them. And I think that's why we've been able to be successful is basically with that educational approach.
That's fantastic. I love that. And there's not many people that you really hear that do something like that, that really put themselves in the shoes of a customer and, walk them through what that thought process is. So, I love that. And I think one of the biggest things too
Thank you.
is, of course, I'm assuming a lot of this is fairly, referral based. You're not blasting ads or, hiring outbound, teams. What makes that community driven model so sustainable?
Yeah, I think that, and you're right. I don't really advertise. I do have a social media, I have a LinkedIn and I have a Facebook, of course, and I have a page that I do post stuff. And we welcome people once they've completed their installation to what we call our solar family. So we do a little shout out and say, hey, welcome to our solar family. This system is blah, blah, blah size and is going to save them this much over time, and have a nice little picture of it. But that's pretty much the marketing outreach that we do. Our customers really are our best source of leads. And because they are educated so well, I like to make the joke that some of them are like my best employees I could ever have for free. And because they're able to explain things to people, and because it's friends or family members, those folks are more willing to listen. It's not like a sales pitch, it's somebody that they know that's already having success with the program. And so that model's worked really well for us. And what I do is give a referral fee to each customer that sends somebody our way that results in a sale. So I spend my marketing dollars on my customers, not on, like newspaper, TV, radio, that type of thing.
That's fantastic. That's almost, I want to say, a more internal and like a more personable way of doing it, because you can be blasting ads, but at what point does that end up becoming counterintuitive, where it takes out the personal aspect of it? And I think obviously it's a conversation to be had when it's like scalability really comes into play. But I think keeping that personal touch is fantastic. And then it kind of segues. It's crazy how that works. Now it segues into the exact same thing I was talking about. Is now we're here where this conversation is like really like speeding up, especially in terms of what you said. The current, um, the current credits and policies that we have now. You don't stop at systems and sales and everything like that. You took on some of the biggest energy players in the state, and won with, I'm sure there was a bunch of help there. But talk to me about the Solar Bill of Rights. What's at stake?
So, in about 2017, I do a lot because of where I live. In Illinois, our utility structure is such that we have what are called investor-owned utilities. And those are regulated by the state through the Illinois Commerce Commission and through the legislature. And then we have municipal utilities that are governed by their city councils in theory. And then we have rural electric cooperatives that are governed by their boards. Excuse me. So in the latter two models, we call those public utilities. And I do a lot of work just because of where I'm located in municipal and rural electric cooperative territories. And so I started to identify differences between the policies that we had for the investor-owned utilities, the IOUs, versus the public utilities, and how I didn't feel that that was fair to the Illinoisans that were living in the muni and co-op territories, that they couldn't have the same opportunities. And so I formed a committee in 2017. I was a board member of the Illinois Solar Energy Association, and myself and a couple of other board members formed this committee and worked together to get it going. And then it morphed over to the Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition, and we now have a statewide committee that works on these things. But in 2019, no, I'm sorry, 2021, I wrote up what I called the hot topics. So it was 13 hot topics where I had identified these discrepancies. So then I met with the Association of Illinois Electric Cooperatives and the Illinois Municipal Electric Agency. They are the head organizations of both of those entities. So we met and we had some discussions and tried to work on some things, and basically it was a friendly, opportunity. But at the end of the day, it didn't go anywhere. It was kind of like, thanks for the information, and that was that. And so through the Muni Co-op Committee with the Clean Jobs Coalition this past year, we were able to take those hot topics and draft them into legislation called the Solar Bill of Rights. And we were able to get that introduced in the House, and we got it to committee, and we got it to stay in committee. But then Illinois came up with the Clean and Reliable Grid Affordability Act, and we morphed the Solar Bill of Rights over. So what it's looking to do is just to give people a fair shake, like that you can have a system size up to 25 kW, so that'll cover most residential and ag producer, small commercial, that you get a fair overproduction rate. So if your solar system is producing during the day, it feeds your loads first, and then anything that's left over is fed back through a meter where it's kept track of. And that overproduction rate in some some rural electric cooperative territories is like 3.32 cents. And they're charging the neighbor who pulls down and uses that power 13.9 cents.
Wow.
So that doesn't make sense, does it?
Not at all.
And so we're, trying to get that changed. And then another is that if you signed up for solar and installed a system under a certain policy, and the board later decides, or city council later decides to change that policy, you're just kind of at the mercy of them.
Fair enough.
And I didn't think that was right. It's like if you sign a contract and you've agreed that this is the policy you're under, to just change people and not do what we call grandfathering or legacy, creating a legacy system, doesn't seem right. So we put that in there, that they should be able to be grandfathered for 25 years from the date they were energized at whatever the overproduction rate was at that time. We put in a process for them to be able to, if I have a problem with my muni or my co-op and I go to my city council or my board and I speak to them and I try to get it resolved and I don't get anywhere, they tell me go pound sand. Normally, that's the end of it. You're done. Unless you want to go to trial court and you want to hire an attorney and you want to have a judge oversee an energy policy that may or may not be that versed on it. That doesn't make sense.
Exactly.
And so we wrote in that the Illinois Commerce Commission, that already has a mediation process, should be an outside third party that could get in the middle to help mediate, not to tell anybody they have to do anything, just to mediate. And that process would be free, just like it is for the folks that live in the investor-owned utility territories. So those are just a couple of the highlights and things that we pointed out that we thought were wrong and got into the bill. So I was pretty freaking excited. We didn't get it passed this session, but we did a lot of educating as a grassroots movement. We don't have paid lobbyists like some of the other side, the muni and co-ops do. And so for us, it's about the people getting out and talking. Power to the people, I like to say.
That's amazing. And some of these companies, I mean, I don't want to mention any of them by name, but they're Goliaths. I mean, you went head to head and actually came out on top. I don't want to necessarily get into the process, but walk us through kind of the emotions of what that meant, not only for you, but for the community, for the business, and all of that.
Well, in this particular one, I will feel better about it once we get it across the finish line, right? Then we'll have a
Fair enough.
celebration. Now, going back to your lemon drops, I do have a lemon drop story. So, another battle was against one of our investor owned utilities up north. They had decided that our muni and co op customers, because they don't so if you're in an IOU territory, you have a line item assessment on your bill each month, and you pay like $3 to $5, and that money goes into the pot that helps to fund the renewable energy credit program, which was a program that was passed to help get us to the goal of 40% renewables by 2030 in the investor-owned utility territories. Pretty aggressive, so we needed like a mechanism that would entice people to want to do solar and help us get there. Um, because muni and co-op customers do not have oversight, there was no reason, or they don't pay into the pot. And so Commonwealth Edison decided that they should be excluded because they're not paying in and their ratepayers are. And so how is that fair? Well, we argued in front of the Illinois Commerce Commission that, well, people don't choose to decide where they live based on the utility. They usually just choose to live there and they're stuck with what they get. And
Exactly.
so, yeah, so we fought them at the ICC level. We won twice. We went to the appellate court. We won there. They took it to the state Supreme Court, and we were given when we started this battle a 20% chance that we might pass. And I had brought in 13 of my competitors. We formed a coalition. And we worked with ELPC, the Environmental Law and Policy Center, and NRDC, and we battled. And the Supreme Court ultimately said, you already lost at the appellate, you're done. And so on that
Wow.
particular day, it goes, here we go with the lemon drops. When I found out that our 20% chance of passing was 100%, we did. We won. We shut down the office. We went and had a few lemon drops. And then I went and met with my senator that night because I already had a meeting set up to meet with him and brief him. So I had to walk in and give full disclosure that, hey, Andy, I've been out drinking lemon drops this afternoon in celebration, and got to tell him why we were celebrating. And he couldn't even believe it and said, oh, if I wouldn't have had things, I would have came and joined you. So it was just a wonderful victory and a way to end an 18-month battle.
It's incredible. Even I know we talked about it before the podcast too, but hearing it a second time is it's the same emotions anyways. It's fantastic and it's such a great change. And I'm excited to see what else you guys have. And I think kind of what helped you with that entire process is that you've worn, a lot of different hats. Like we mentioned earlier, you had your insurance exec, you were a teacher, developer, advocate. What's been like the through line across it all? What kept you in the fight when, there were easier roads? Not necessarily with policy, but just in the entire career.
Well, this is funny, but when I was in high school, a senior in high school, my classmates voted me most likely to beat the system, and I took that real seriously. So, in a good way, like I wanted to go out and do good work for good people, and I wanted to help people find a path to sustainability and self-sufficiency, and I wanted to make sure that everyone was getting a fair shake. And so I call myself kind of like the Robin Hoodess of solar, if you will. Um, and that's my passion. My passion is, yeah, I love to educate. I love to sell solar. I love to do the right thing for the environment. But my passion is really to make a difference in the world. And I feel like through doing this, through being a teacher, that I'm doing that. When I was in insurance in my early 20s, I could have argued, oh, yeah, I'm helping people because I'm making sure they have the right coverage. And I did that for a period of time. But finally, in my late 20s, I was like, yeah, but really, at the end of the day, are you making a difference, a real difference?
Mhm.
And that's when I decided no, and I went these other paths now.
That's amazing. I love that. It's a great path. And I mean, for listeners who are maybe sitting on an idea or stuck in a job that doesn't necessarily serve them, doesn't really give them a purpose or really satisfy their passion, I guess might be the better wording. What's your message to them about, stepping into purpose?
Don't be afraid. I think that fear is the devil, and fear of the unknown many times keeps us from doing things that might move us forward. I was terribly scared about this when I endeavored to do it. I didn't know if it would work. I didn't know if I was really going to do it. When I told people that I'd started a solar business, I sometimes had to take a deep breath and believe it myself. And
Fair
especially
enough.
when I was doing those 3.5 years of research and development, and I'm like, is all of this really going to work out? And I was self-financing all of that, so that was some of my own money that was going in, savings. I was a single mom at the time, so it wasn't easy to do. But I went to training. I was in the room with primarily men, and they were electricians, some of them master electricians, some of them electrical engineers. And then here's little Michelle that doesn't know much about electricity at all. But I had the passion, and I had the desire to know. And I took all the install classes with these gentlemen. And let me tell you, they were the nicest that they could be. They held my hand, they got me through it, they supported me when I had silly questions, didn't treat me like they were silly questions. And so I can't say enough good things about the MREA and the camaraderies that I built there, and how my classmates really helped me to overcome a lot of my fears in that segment. And then just in going forward with the business full time and quitting a full time job to go to this, that was the second fear factor. Um, and it really just takes a lot of belief in yourself and in what your passion is, what you are endeavoring to do, and knowing that you're not going to let anything bring you down. That if there's a setback, it's a setback. It's not a failure, it's a setback. And you
Exactly.
find a way around it. My three favorite words for everyone are find a solution. So, anytime when the going gets rough, if you remember find a solution and that's what you work towards, it helps to kind of put that fear at bay and keep your focus in the right direction.
That's amazing. It's true, right? Like you're always going to be kind of in the thick of it. There's going to be problems. I'm sure, like we talked earlier as well, like there's going to be tons of stories that you might not even remember right now, but in the moment it was the most stressful, crazy thing. And I
Yeah.
kind of want to touch a little bit on that as well. I mean, just based on your entire story, you left a steady teaching job to dive into solar before it was even remotely mainstream. And it was great that like, you were able to make these relationships. Everyone's very supportive. I think that's super important. I think that kind of relates to I guess the people and like the persona that you see in the industry all the time. But one thing that you can't necessarily control but also has such a huge impact is, friends and family. So how did, friends and family react to such a leap where you're stepping away from something huge and something fairly stable into something that's a huge risk?
Well, at the time, everyone was supportive, and now, once I finally, my friends especially, now where I'm at versus when I started, even my attorney, I've had people tell me, well, we kind of just thought you were crazy. And, but they didn't tell me that. They were supportive, but now they'll tell me, kind of just thought you were crazy, but you did it. And I'm like, yeah, yeah, I did. Thank you. So everyone, I couldn't, I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't have a lot of good people that stood behind me and made me feel like I could do it. And so I do give a lot of appreciation to my friends, to my family, to my professional partnerships. All of these people have gotten the business to where it is today.
That's amazing. And I think that's what kind of created that company culture. So that's kind of one of the last segments I want to get into is exactly how your process works, because I think it's always important to get the story and like the whole reasoning behind the drive and the purpose. But now I'm kind of curious to get into, maintaining quality because I think it's important when you're using subcontractors, and maybe explain that for the people as well, but especially with how new solar players are entering the field, how should they maintain the quality?
Yeah. So, part of that 3.5 years of research and development was identifying those type of things, and I've had to transition somewhat. So my model is such that over the course of time that I've built it, where I developed a group buy program with my distributor. So I said, look, I'll buy all of my products from a particular, because back when I first started, I might buy this from this one because it was less expensive and this from this one. And then I got to realizing that is so much work on everyone's part. How about if I just put out and I said, look, I'll do a volume commitment. And for that volume commitment, I would like a reduction in price. And I'll be exclusive to you, and I'll be exclusive to these particular products. Keep it simple. So we started the group buy program, and at that time I brought in two other of my competitors, one in Southern Illinois and one in Northern Illinois. So we weren't competing in the same market, and they helped me to build that volume that we needed to really get a nice discount. And we're still friends today, by the way.
Amazing.
And so we got the group buy program going. Um, then we moved forward, and now we have what are called special purchase agreements with each of the manufacturers that we use on all of our installs. This creates efficiency because not only of the pricing that I can pass along to the customers, but for the installers, you mentioned the subcontractors. So I use the same guys every time, but they're not employees, they're subs. And so for them, knowing the same products are going to be used and really being able to be trained and up to speed on that helps to ensure that we're giving customers a good quality solution and that they have the same people all the time that they'll be dealing with. So that's been a big part of it too. In 2016, I hired my current office manager, who has been a godsend. Her name's Kara Blankenship, and I can't say enough great things about her. She is more of the behind the scenes person, so she does all of the when we you call if you were to call me and you said, hey, I'd like to take a look at solar. So I would be the intake person. I would take your information. I would gather the past 12 months of consumption data. Then I'd send all that to Kara. She would take it. She would initially do a system sizing. So we could say, hey, in a perfect world, this is the size system you need. Then we'd move to doing a design, looking at your actual space, your solar resource, where we could place this array. We'd do the design. We have a tool that allows us to drop it in using the exact module that we're going to use. So you get an aerial view of what that's going to look like on your property. Then we move to doing that cost model that we talked about, that 27 pager that has all the data. And when that's ready, then Kara lets the customer know, and they sign up via Calendly for a presentation with me, either a phone conference for the folks that don't like to use Zoom, or a Zoom, which is my preference because we can share screens. And I will
Exactly.
side note, if there's one good thing that came from COVID, it's the fact that we came to understand that we can really do business in a more efficient way.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
yeah, so do the presentation, and then if we sell, we move into product procurement and contracting, setting up the installation date, and then we get all the products shipped, dispatch our install teams. We knock out, just an average install in a few days. We allow a week per install. We do the project management throughout completion. And then at the end, we order all the final inspects and facilitate getting the system energized, release the monitoring. And then we provide an electronic file at the end that has all the solar data from all the products and everything we installed and say thank you very much. Welcome to our family.
That's fantastic. I love that. And I think that's going to be very, very helpful to, a lot of people who wonder that, you're not starting a company in order to, just make money. You're there to really create a beautiful service, like a well-oiled machine that, really brings customer satisfaction out. And, you don't need a ton of employees, right? Like that's the other thing. It all comes down to, how you're able to use your resources and, be efficient. I don't even know what the word I'm looking for is, but I think just very like streamline exactly what you're doing, and just get
It's
really,
really
really good at a
processes and
couple things.
procedures and, setting up the processes and procedures and then communicating them and then enforcing them. Especially when you have a large team, you have a lot of people that are working together and we're all dependent on each other. And so I'm
Exactly.
always stressing about how when one spoke in the wheel is broken, the wheel doesn't quite turn right, guys. So we all have to be good spokes and we have to turn together.
Exactly.
And so and I have great subcontractors now, great teammates. and the owners are, all the owners are directly involved. I think that's another big thing in creating the culture that I wanted to create, having owners involved, because then they care. They care about the
Exactly.
customer and they want to advocate. And so that's been another really good move that we made in making sure our subcontractors have ownership involved.
That's fantastic. I love that. And I guess what's next then for, the whole company? And let's say we come back and we talk in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. Is there anything on the docket, anything in the pipeline that you're excited about?
Well, if I were a younger woman, I would probably endeavor to do agrivoltaics. I think that is a wonderful progression for photovoltaics. And what that basically is taking like your family farm and maybe you transition an area so you've got a ground mounted array, but the modules are up high. So beneath the arrays you can still plant and cultivate shade crops. It gives your livestock a place to be able to have shade and still graze around it. I see it eventually as creating an opportunity where we can have organic foods produced locally that can then be sold in the local markets. And all the while, the ag producer can be enjoying free energy from the sun to offset their electrical load at the farm. And we get back to having really good food. We diversify crops, so we're not just doing corn and soybeans. We're not so dependent on foreign markets to purchase our products. For anybody who's real ambitious, who's out there looking for an opportunity, I highly recommend agrivoltaics. But for this old lady, we're going to be talking more about moving into storage, using that as an opportunity for people to be able to have dispatchable power. I think with security issues in the future, that is important to some folks. I think with grid stability in the future, that's important. So, for what I can do, I think moving to that and incorporating that into more of our projects is what you'll see happening this year with Wind Solar USA.
That's amazing. I love that. And where can people find all of the information about the company, about what you do? Is there any specific sites that you want to mention?
Sure. So we have a website, windsolar.usa.com. It was also, because I'm a teacher, built as an educational opportunity where people can just go and learn before they ever even reach out to us. And so feel free to visit that. We have photo galleries that show all the different types of installs that we've done. We also have a Facebook page, Wind Solar USA, and a LinkedIn page. And in terms of contact, my contact information is Michelle, Michelle, at windsolar.usa.com. And my business phone is 217-825-4206.
Oh, thank you so much, Michelle. And for everybody listening, I think this was very great. We heard a story from solar installs to, state houses. Michelle Knox is proof that a single voice can ripple through an entire industry. So thank you, Michelle. And thank you, everybody, for listening to Off the Grid on the Record. If you like this episode, share it, subscribe, and keep tuning in for real stories from people reimagining our energy future. So until next time, take care. And thank you, Michelle, once again.
Thank you, Yark.